Yeah, I think it's better now, right?
I can see you.
Perfect. Sure. So how was your week?
It's been a
Thank
week.
you. And
I'm
thank you for
happy it's
doing this. Thank you
Friday.
for allowing us a little bit of time in your schedule.
No
It's so good
problem.
to connect again.
No
Yeah.
problem.
I
How
mean,
was your week?
I
How's
feel
everything going?
like it's been hectic, but good. Fridays are good because then we can have a weekend, you know? So yeah, I'm happy it's Friday. I feel like you and I can literally talk for like hours, you know, but I just want us to give people who've joined us a glimpse, at least a little bit of inspiration of what you're about, which is, I mean, I personally take great inspiration from a lot of what you do. And whatever happens with the internet today, we're not going to really worry about this. I think this is just the rhythm on these little segments of ours. We know that whatever happens, we just keep carrying on. It will fix itself as we move along. But if you can hear me, um, I want you to just take us through your. In fact, before I even start off with that, I want to let people know the context in which we're having this conversation today. You would have noticed that we, for the past 3 weeks or so, we've been having like a series of hashtag My Africa chats with quite a number of people. I see she's having trouble with her internet, but anyway, as soon as she comes back, we'll let her in. Let's try again. So as I was saying, we were trying to chat with a few people about their love affair with Africa to see how they can, you know, inspire Africa and do all those, you know, basically just that psyche, that mindset change with Africa. And this is one of the series that we're doing, which will end soon. So, Chi, I want you to take us through because I see internet is not good for good. It's not going to be kind to us, but let's try and get as much as we possibly can out of the talk. You
Absolutely.
express yourself a lot through word. I mean, I know you, and I really want you to share yourself with those who don't. You write poetry, you write short stories. You've been part of amazing platforms. Even I think the Writivism Festival. You've been part of that.
Yeah.
You've been collaborated into numerous literature. I know that I've worked with you as a journalist in the newsroom, and we've shared some bylines together as well in our newsroom days. But I want you to share with us what is it about storytelling that you believe keeps us whole as a people?
Yeah. So I think there's two things for me, Jabulile, and I think the first one is the pedagogy of discomfort. And the second one is the therapeutic nature of writing. And so when I talk about the pedagogy of discomfort, it's really about it's a school of thought that believes you need to feel uncomfortable to be able to change the status quo. So if you look at a
Mm.
lot of the pieces I've written, and there's two that come to mind, two in particular that come to mind. I wrote one about prostitution, and I wrote another one about incest. And I mean, I
Mhm.
wrote it as graphically as I understood it to be. And I'm inspired by the world around me. I'm inspired by the experiences of others, a lot of contemporary issues. And I remember my
Mm.
peers reading these pieces and they were like, okay, you did all of that? It made me a bit uncomfortable. And for me, it was important because you need to feel uncomfortable to understand the plight of others, because
Yep.
we exist in these ivory towers within the context of our own lives or our small circles, unconcerned about what is happening to other people or happening in other communities. And so for me, that's an important piece, the pedagogy of discomfort and the awareness you create in that process. The other one for me is just the therapeutic nature of writing. So as the
Yeah.
receiver of the writing, who picks up a book, whatever it might be, to potentially see your story portrayed in that narrative and to understand that it's not something that you have experienced alone. Or the other angle is just to be able to escape is very
Hmm.
therapeutic. And,
Yeah.
I remember the first time I picked up a book for my enjoyment, and I'll never forget this because for me, that was the moment. And I was 10 years old, and my mother's older brother had just passed away. And it was the first time I had experienced death in that way. And so almost
Mm.
becoming very recluse. And I remember picking up this book, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, by Mildred
Mhm.
D. Taylor. And it's one of my favorite books till this day because that started my journey with reading and writing. And it was very therapeutic. for me to be able to escape into this book as a 10-year-old, didn't understand what death was. But even as the writer, you know, and that's also my context, you know, whether it's something you see or something you experience, to be able to put that pen to paper and like express yourself, for me, is a very therapeutic experience. So those are the two things for me. Yeah.
Also very, very intense, I suppose, and to some extent quite honest, really. Also very bold, because you're not sure how your work will be interpreted by readers, right? I think once it leaves your hands, it's really beyond your control, because as to how people relate to your work and how they take it in, you know, even interpret it, it's really, really just sort of beyond you. So I love that you've written extensively, and you're also well-traveled, I must say. And you have a very deep and solid sense of who and what we are, right? How can we then, as Africans, revisit our roots, if you like, and our souls, and somewhat create fertile ground to sort of reset and reboot our way of thinking?
Yeah. And it might sound simple, right? But we need to be curious and exploratory. It sounds simple, but the reality is we're often so consumed by day to day. And if I look at our generation, Jabulile, you go to work, you know, not from 9 to 5. People are working all hours, you know, of the day. People have families, they're married, they have children. There's things to be done. We are out here hardcore adulting, right? And we often get consumed in that. And so for me, it's the curiosity, the exploration of what exists outside of the mundane, what exists outside of what we've been conditioned and told we need to do or achieve by a certain point in our lives. So that, exactly. So just that moment to stand still and be like, I want to be curious about something else. I want to explore something else. And, you know, in my own, you know, personal current experience, I'm very curious about African spiritual systems, you know, and just taking a step back and being like, you know, my people's narrative is not one of colonialism. Like what was there before, you know? And so kind of exploring that and being curious about what are the origins of our belief systems and trying to explore that a bit more. So as simple as it sounds, we need to be curious, exploratory, and we just need to be able to take a step back from really, for lack of a better word, the matrix we exist in.
And from a step back, if I may add, to consuming everything, like literally, and not producing much, really. You know, I mean, I think a greater part of what shapes us is from what we consume and embrace as our own understanding or some norm, really, that just really get to set a social construct of some sort that kind of throws Africanism under the bus very easily. So I think we need to be quite conscious of that. You have you love photography. I think the first time when we were, I think back in the day, if I remember, as journalists, I remember in the newsroom, you were one of those journalists who would carry your own camera, you know, and it was like something we all needed to have in a way, but you had it, right?
Yeah.
And I now follow your Instagram page, and for people who are tuned in here, I mean, if they like, if you really have a fetish for, you know, just nice, serene photography, you should follow Chivimbiso's page. You kind of like just go into her IG and you have this essence of peace and just calm, I suppose, aura, really, because you share the most amazing pictures, I think. And I mean, you've carried a camera, you love photography. I want to know, what is it about pictures that you love so much? Because I know you would post more pictures of things and spaces than of yourself, and I've always been fascinated by that.
Yeah, and so that's actually a new thing, right? And so I'm very sentimental. I'm nostalgic, right? And in saying that, it's not that I'm not present in the moment. I'm very present, because I think to live a full life, you need to be present. But I'm also very nostalgic and sentimental in the sense that I grew up in a household where there was a conscious effort for memories to be made and for memories to be captured. So if you go to my mother's house, there are bookshelves full of photographs. And so nostalgic and sentimental in the sense of like, whenever I go visit my mom, I'll go pick up a few of those albums. They're actually too many to go through. And like, just recollect memories and moments that I've made with my family, and where were we, who is this, and you're all these people, you have no idea of who they are and so forth. And so for me, it's the nostalgic sentimental piece. What it's become today is something different. You don't see a lot of people, but it's still documenting, the places and spaces that I encounter. And that's because, and like a lot of it is very earth-based. So, forest, the ocean, essentially I'm a Bundu basher of note, right? And I love the earth. And I think it alludes back to, what I said earlier, but trying to understand African religious, spiritual systems, you know what I mean? Our connection to the earth. And so for me, it's really that connection to the earth. I absolutely love being in nature. And I always say to my partner, for me to go on a hike, for me to, go on a walk, for me to be by the ocean, for me is almost like church, to be reconnecting with the earth. And that's why I love photography. I mean, the other thing is I just love this continent, and you know this. And so Africa is my first love, but it's also my biggest heartbreak, right? There's so many things that are amazing about this continent, but there's so much more that we have to do. And to be able to document like the earth, the nature pieces that exist on these continents that are so beautiful, for me is very therapeutic as well, if I can put it that way. And that's why I love photography.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly find therapy of some sort when I visit your page, absolutely. And I'd encourage anybody to do the same. It helps. It's quite lovely, I must say. I think you've mentioned a little bit about how it's, Africa is a love affair, really, like most of us, right? But there's also somewhat pain to some extent when we look at we have a very strong cultural ethos, as African people always have, really. If anything, I think colonization was just a disruption, as we know. Really, that's not our story.
Yeah.
But over and above the music and the photography and the actual human experience, which is really wonderful all the time, what do you think we can do to develop ourselves as a continent?
Yeah.
In terms of really just, progressing forward.
Yeah. I think the first thing for me is mindset, right? And Biko said this decades ago. It's the mindset. If you do not believe that you belong in particular spaces, that you deserve particular things, that you are inferior or you're not as good as other people, whatever the case might be, nothing is ever going to change. And so I think the biggest thing for us is the mindset. And unfortunately, in our day-to-day experiences, we still see like this mindset that people are born with, even in independent African countries. You and I were born free, and so you'll see a lot of our peers who, go into particular spaces and still feel discomfort or cower down. And so for me, it's the mindset. That's the biggest thing. The other thing for me is unity. And so if you look at, like, let's look at the winds of change on the African continent. That was a collective effort of leaders across the continent. So I remember Kwame Nkrumah said, when Ghana was liberated, he said, we are not free until the entire continent is free.
It's free.
Right?
Yeah.
If we look at the land repossessions in Zimbabwe, for instance, that was supposed to happen in the 90s, but African leaders met with Mugabe at the time and told him, if you take that land, South Africa will not be free. They will say this is what happens in countries, in an African country when you liberate it, right? And so we took a lot of bullets for each other as Africans, which I don't see today. And I love this continent. I am an African before I am a Zimbabwean, before I am a Shona woman, I am an African. And so I think for us to be able to progress, the unity piece is so big. Like Congo, for instance, for me, the DRC is one of my biggest heartbreaks. And the reason I say this is that country has the capacity to feed and sustain the entire African continent, just their resources, let alone everything else we have, right? But there will never be peace in the Congo because it's not in the interest
of
monopoly
powers that be. Yeah.
Of the powers that be, right? And you need a concerted effort from the African continent as a whole to say there will be peace in the DRC. but we've become so individualized, you know, on an individual level within ourselves, right? And so we don't have that community ethos. And as a continent, so individualized within our nationalities, right? And so for me, the mindset and the unity piece are a big one, but you can't get to the point of unity if the mindset hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We certainly cannot. I cannot help but agree with you there. I mean, I think if anything, really, just mindset is the beginning of it all. I've always said to people, how you view Africa, how you view the idea and concept of Africa is directly linked to how you relate to other Africans in your country and beyond.
Absolutely.
So that perception is very dangerous. It can make or break. And I mean, we see it. I don't want to ask you what the perception is. I really think it's you know, our continent, we see what happens, whichever part of it you're in. It's quite evident. There's spelling evidence of tribalism, xenophobia, Afrophobia, if you like. All of these diseases that each of us have, really, little pockets of it that are quite regressive to this unity that we all so badly love. But having said that, I mean, I know talking about African leaders is really a topic for another day, but in your view, how would you describe a leader that you wish we could have in any part of this continent? What kind of leader do you think would be an ideal African leader to really just help us, you know, just not move against the wave?
Yeah. Jabulile, it is simple. A leader who has the interests of the people at heart. It is that simple. And like my favorite leader of all time is Thomas Sankara. Because for me, he is an example of a leader that had the interest of his people at heart. Whether it was women's rights, and he was way ahead of his time. Whether it was the coffers of the state, or no, we do not need to be buying and driving Prados and Mercs. You can drive a normal sedan like anybody else. And so the type of leader that the African continent needs is a leader who actually has the interests of the people at heart. So how do you start to shift policy? How do you start to shift economics that speak to the interests of your people and not monopoly capital and not foreign direct investment? And so that is my ideal African leader. And like, in my mind, it's very simple. I'm not a politician, and we all know politics is complex, and being in that space, you know, might be a bit more complex than that. But for me, it's like, if you're going to be the head of state, you were put there by your people. Serve your people before you serve any other master. Yeah.
Please. Girl, I think you need to give them a crash course, some master class on Leadership 101 and help us out. Because, man, we really, anyway, you know, it's fine. We love Africa, and we'll always try and support leaders or whatever efforts that help us progress forward. I always say that we don't have any other Africa. This is the only one we have. We have to get it right. And even if we don't get it right, we've got to at least die trying, as you know, some people would say.
Yeah.
Listen, it's been great chatting to you, but I cannot let you go until I get something from you for young people. You know that in South Africa this month, it's June. We celebrate the month, young people, obviously at the backdrop of the 1976 riots that took place during apartheid. And I really just I'm keen to hear what your message is for any South African young person watching us right now.
Absolutely. And so just to follow off on what you said, Jabulile, we need to save ourselves, because now nobody's coming to save us, right? And so my piece of advice would be execute. Yeah. And when we talk about execute, particularly in the context of young people and the youth, it's always about entrepreneurship, you know, start a business, create jobs, etc. That's great. But we are not all going to be entrepreneurs. That's just the reality. And so when I say the word execute, I want people to be able to take this and use it within their own context. And so, for instance, if you're a young, you know, woman or man, and you have a skill in a particular sector, you are particularly good at something, what stops you from becoming a mentor for another African, right? So that they can also climb the ladder, that they can execute on their dreams, whatever the case might be. And so for me, it's really about the little things. The little things matter. How do we install that community ethos back into our society, right? Give the little you can. And it's not always tangible things, right? Sometimes it's just of your time, right? Have a conversation with somebody, give them a piece of advice, educate them, coach them about a particular thing, and that has the potential to change the trajectory of their lives. And so, in sum, again, execute in the little ways that you can.
Absolutely. It's in the small ways. It's in the small things. The devil is in the detail, as they say. So it's about that selfless giving that we give, really, when nobody's watching or looking, when there's no camera. I think I call it impactful work. You know, the groundwork when there's nobody clapping or any cameras.
Exactly.
Anyway, one day we'll talk about Africa and the love of cameras by our politicians and forgetting the work, but remembering the camera. Topic for another day. Chi, thank you so much, sister friend. I mean, we could talk for hours, but the idea of this hashtag my series is really to hashtag my Africa series is to really just plant a seed of hope, just a little bit of a provocation for people to go and do their own homework and search further and research further for their own interest. So thank you for your tissue. Well,
you're most welcome, Lile. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll probably chat soon. We wish you love and light. Take care.
Thank you so much. Take care. Have a good evening.
Okay then.
Bye.
Bye.